Before I even start talking about this game, I have to say, I still can't believe I'm playing this right now. You know, if you've followed me for a while, you know that I was very skeptical. I think many of you were as well, those of you who at least follow this series. I was skeptical that we would actually see the game in 2017. Like, when they first showed that lineup of games that were set for the Switch in 2017, I was like, well, we may as well push Xenoblade 2 off that list right off the bat, because it's not going to happen. I won't believe it until the game is in my Switch and I'm playing it. That was a quote I said in numerous videos. Well, the game is in my Switch and I am playing it. Crazy. I've also mentioned numerous times that I think these JRPG type games in general are probably best suited for a system like the Switch. When you've got games that require these massive time investments, I think having them at the ready, being able to play them any place, anytime, it's pretty optimal. And I've been waiting for a new one to really sink my teeth into, so is Xenoblade Chronicles 2 that game, the RPG the Switch needed? For the casuals, the newcomers out there, I want to say this. Xenoblade Chronicles has a lot of mechanics going on in it. All of them do. The combat is different from a lot of other games, even other RPGs, and you get a ton of things thrown at you right from the get-go. Be ready for constant pop-ups at the beginning of the game explaining something new to you. And especially with the combat as the game goes on, it really just continues evolving over the course of the game, ever changing. So once you think you kind of have it mastered, they're going to throw something new at you. It can be a bit daunting, but I don't like it when reviewers, typically at like the big major outlets, your trusted sources of gaming news, I don't like it when those types of people paint this as a major negative, because here's the thing, and a lot of these people don't mention it, and I think a lot of you who may consider yourselves RPG experts will agree with me. Yes, there are a lot of systems, a lot of mechanics to learn, to wrap your head around, but you don't have to get that deep into all of these things. You don't have to master everything. I always see the complaint, oh, things get overwhelming in pretty much every RPG. To me, it really only gets overwhelming if you let it. These games want to present you with a variety of options on ways to grow your character and yourself as the player throughout the game. Don't forget, they're long as hell, taking dozens of hours to beat at minimum. So you need new stuff, new mechanics, new systems, to keep you engaged throughout the game. Like, I would think it would be hard to sell somebody on, like a straight shooter game, FPS campaign that was 150 hours. Walk into the corridor, shoot all the guys, walk into the next one, shoot all the guys. It would get so tedious. You have to keep having the new elements to keep you engaged in the game. Simply, I would say, either to RPG newcomers or just newcomers to this series, take notes of the things that interest you and focus on improving those aspects. This is the whole point of any RPG experience. You're building your character and playing your way. Focus on the stuff that feels good when you play it and build that stuff up, and, just push most of the other stuff to the side. I always also say side quests in these games are your best friend. If you focus on and tackle a good amount of the side quests, you'll keep your character, your party, ahead of the curve when it comes to completing story content. So, I always tell people, if you're not very confident in playing one of these types of games, you don't have to necessarily go out and mindlessly grind. I feel like some people get worried about that too, like, oh, you gotta just go out and kill 2,000 boars or whatever. Just focus on getting some of those side quests done, and you'll get enough XP and resources to keep your guys strong enough so that when you have like the more harder story stuff, boss fights and that, you shouldn't have too tough of a time tackling it. And I get that it can be hard. I know a lot of us get OCD about these things, and feel like you have to do everything, which is fine. It's doable in these games, but I think most people will enjoy it better if you kind of just go with the flow. Again, with like the side quests, if one kind of seems lame, like a collectathon or something, skip it. Within a few hours, you'll settle into, I guess, your groove. You'll find out what kind of things you like to do, and that's when you're really going to start enjoying this game. I wanted to say that because I do feel like the biggest hurdle with people getting into Xenoblade, or again, just RPGs in general sometimes, is they find them intimidating, and they are to some extent, but they don't have to be so much, essentially. But if you do allow yourself to dive into Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you're going to find yourself in a fantastic experience. The combat in the Xenoblade Chronicles games is some of my favorite RPG combat ever. Might be my favorite. You're given enough freedom moving around and getting proper positioning to give it a slight action feel, but planning your attacks and syncing them with other members of your party for increased damage requires all that proper RPG timing and strategy. And again, I think the game gives you plenty of help, just constantly, throwing those pop-ups at you. Hey, listen, did you know you could do this? The moves are also coupled with little notes on how to use them most efficiently, like, the back attack obviously does the most damage from the back, the side attack does best when facing the enemy side, etc. So even if you forget what things do or what types of skills you have active, it's easy to check up on it. And like I said, yeah, the combat does kind of get more complicated as the game goes on, but I think that's a good thing because, you start things off fairly simply, honestly. I don't think, most people will have trouble grasping things, in the first few hours of the game. And then slowly you're getting introduced to these new and more systems. So, you're not trying to tackle everything for the combat right from the start. I want to talk a bit about the aesthetics of the game, visuals, which have been seemingly a bit of a debated topic on this game. I see people's issues with playing the game in handheld mode. The resolution, frame rate drops can be pretty annoying. I don't find them so prevalent in handheld mode that it's really taking from my overall enjoyment, but again, I clearly see them. I'm not denying they exist. And given the look of the game, I do kind of have to ask why, because to me, the game does not look nearly as visually impressive as X did on the Wii U. And that game ran surprisingly well on the system. Pop-in, if I remember correctly, was more of an issue in X than things like resolution and frame rate, and I'll take that all day. Granted, maybe that game would also have issues running in handheld mode on the Switch. I mean, we don't know. But it just seemed odd to me. And while this is obviously more of a follow-up to the original Xenoblade Chronicles, I can't help but compare it to X. I've gone on record, I've stated X was my favorite game. It was my game of the year for 2015. And full disclosure, I haven't finished Xenoblade 2 yet. I've got about 30 hours into it at this point, and I am someone who can get pretty caught up in the side stuff, so I don't know how far I really am story-wise. But overall, at this point, I liked X better, which also has a lot to do with the skells in that game, the mechs. I loved those things. That's when it really clicked for me, and I just totally lost myself in the game. And to reiterate, it was my game of the year for 2015, so saying I didn't like this game as much isn't really that much of a knock against it. Story-wise, do you like your top 10 anime betrayals type stuff, you weeb? Because then you'll really enjoy this story, I think. Sure, maybe not the most deep or well-written or anything like that, but there's some solid character development and a lot of twists and turns along the way. Not to mention some fantastic action scenes. There were some really awesome action sequences in the cinematics for this game that, you can never go wrong with a good action scene. Compared to the original Xenoblade Chronicles, though, if we push X to the side, I definitely see this as a proper sequel. Makes sense given the continued numbering right. But you do not have to play the original, and I want to stress this, you do not have to play the original Xenoblade Chronicles to enjoy Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The stories are totally different. And I think fans of that game are obviously really going to enjoy this game. But I feel like RPG players are always pretty knowledgeable about these things. I doubt if you're super into RPGs that, you were waiting for my dumbass to tell you what I think about the game. But I'd like to see more newcomers get into this genre and this series. Sure, it can be intimidating. I'm not trying to downplay it. But the game does hold your hand, I think, when it needs to. And there are, of course, countless guides and stuff already for this game online. Because just really for the combat, I feel like everyone needs to experience the combat of Xenoblade Chronicles because it's so unique and it's fantastic. I love it. And it's obviously that's a huge key to getting engaged in one of these types of games, because obviously you're going to be running around and hitting stuff with your weapons pretty frequently. So I hope some of you, if you are on the fence, please consider checking this game out. And with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in the comments. As always, I'm John Zakari, and thanks for watching.